Tonight, if your mind is still tangled in the echoes of a long day unfinished, thoughts, worries without names, you don't need to force them away. You only need to stay here just a little longer. We live in a world that constantly asks us to move faster, be clearer, and understand more. Yet the more we try to understand, the more tired the mind becomes. The tighter we hold on, the more everything knots itself together. And perhaps what you need right now is not more information, but a stretch of quiet wide enough to let your breathing slow. In this video, we won't rush to find answers. Instead, we'll begin a very slow journey from the familiar earth beneath your feet, gently expanding into the night sky, across distances that light itself takes years to cross, and onward to the very edge of what humans can observe. Not to overwhelm you, but to let your mind grow lighter. Because when you stand before the true vastness of the universe, the things that once weighed so heavily on you begin to feel smaller. They don't disappear, they simply no longer need to be carried. As Carl Sagan once wrote somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Tonight, you don't need to find it. Just listen and let the universe tell its own story very slowly. Tonight, we begin with something that sounds very simple. Not a question about the meaning of life, not about right or wrong, gain or loss, just size. The size of the universe. A concept that seems neutral, scientific, almost emotionless. But the moment we try to touch it, not with equations, but with feeling, something curious happens. The mind begins to sway ever so slightly. Not fear, just dizziness. Because the modern human mind has grown accustomed to measuring everything within frames that fit neatly into daily life. A few meters for a room, a few kilometers for a journey, a few years for a plan. Even time itself is often chopped into appointments, notifications, deadlines. Everything is expected to sit comfortably within the reach of conscious control. But when we speak of the size of the universe, those frames begin to crack. Not loudly, not violently. They simply, quietly stop working. Perhaps that is why thoughts of the universe so often exhaust the mind. Not because it is too far away, but because it refuses to shrink itself to fit us. It asks us to loosen our grip on who we think we are. And perhaps that is why you are here in this moment. Not to understand more, but to let go of a little more. We live in a world that constantly demands clarity. We must name our emotions, define our goals, know where we are and where we are going. But on some nights, all those questions only make the mind heavier. Thoughts spin like planets that have lost their orbit. They don't collide, they just keep drifting. Tonight, we are not trying to organize them. We are simply placing them into a larger context. Tonight, we're going to measure just one thing, the size. That sentence is not a challenge. It feels more like an invitation. A very gentle invitation, like opening a balcony door at night, letting cool air flow into a room that has been sealed all day. When we begin to measure, we realize something almost immediately. What we can see, the stars, the faint bands of light across the sky, the breathtaking images from telescopes, all of it is only a very small part, not a more important part, just the part we are able to see. Looked at directly, that thought can feel unsettling, because it touches a quiet, hidden fear that we do not hold the entirety of reality, that most of what exists lies beyond our capacity to perceive. But if we look more slowly, more gently, the feeling shifts. It becomes a calm kind of release. Because if everything we see is only a small part, then the things weighing on you right now, a decision not yet made, a word left unsaid, a mistake not yet forgiven, are also only very small parts of a far larger picture. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Look at the immensity of time behind you and of time ahead of you." He did not write this to make humans feel small. He wrote it to remind us that within that vast flow, what is happening inside our minds does not need to carry the weight of eternity. When we place ourselves in a cosmic context, it is not to deny pain, but to allow it to stop occupying the entire inner space. Sighs, when felt in the right way, does not crush a person. It softens them. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And perhaps the size of the universe is one of the gentlest ways to do just that. Not by shining a light into the darkness, but by expanding the space so the darkness no longer feels cramped. When you realize that what you are seeing is only a small fraction of all that exists, you may also allow yourself not to fully understand yourself in a single night. You do not need to resolve every inner conflict. You do not need to reach a clear conclusion. You are allowed to remain inside the question. Tonight, that question is very simple. Not who am I, not what should I do, just this. How large is everything really? And as that question opens, your mind may begin to slow. Like gazing up at a cloudless night sky, thoughts naturally grow smaller, not because they are forced away, but because they no longer fill the entire field of view. You do not need to keep up with the universe. You do not need to understand it. You only need to let it be there and allow yourself to be here. In that moment, there is a very particular kind of silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of no longer needing to strain to understand, to control, to define. The universe asks nothing of you. It simply exists. And in that existence, it allows you to exist as well, without proof, without justification, without perfection. Tonight, as we begin to measure something that seems so simple, we are not truly measuring the universe. We are measuring the amount of space the mind needs in order to rest. And if you feel a slight dizziness, a hint of lightness, a gentle distance from your familiar thoughts, that is completely okay. Because that is the sign that the door of the night has opened. When the door of the night has opened and the question of size is still hovering in that quiet space, we can take one more step very gently, not to go farther, but to look more deeply into what has just been revealed. Because the moment we begin to measure, not with instruments, but with feeling, a very curious number appears. Not a number that impresses by being large, but because it is astonishingly small, only about 5%. That is the portion of the universe we are able to see. The stars scattered across the night sky, the faint luminous bands of galaxies, the breathtaking images from telescopes where light has traveled billions of years to reach the human eye. Everything we have ever called the universe is in truth only a thin slice of reality. The rest, 95%, does not emit light, does not take shape, does not answer our gaze directly. And yet, it is real. Taken too quickly, this thought can cause the mind to sink. Because humans often seek reassurance in what can be seen, named, and verified. We trust light because light feels certain. And darkness, whether in the universe or in the mind, is often mistaken for absence. But tonight, we do not look at darkness as a lack. We look at it as the greater part of reality. The universe is not made mostly of what shines. It is sustained by what remains silent. Dark matter, dark energy, names that sound more like whispers than declarations. They do not glow, do not reflect, do not communicate with our eyes. And yet they hold galaxies together. They are what cause space itself to continue expanding very slowly, very steadily. There is a gentle paradox here. What we cannot see is precisely what allows everything we can see to exist. And when we place this beside inner life, a familiar parallel appears. Within you, the loudest things, thoughts, memories, worries, plans, may also be only a small fraction, while the larger, deeper, quieter part is where everything is held, supported, sustained. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychological Types, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." He did not say that darkness must be chased away. He said it must be acknowledged. The universe asks the same of us. It does not demand that we see everything. It simply exists with a very small portion of light and a very large portion of darkness, and both are necessary. Imagine that you are living inside a bubble of observation, a fragile bubble drifting very slowly in a boundless ocean. The light you can see, the stars, the galaxies, are only the points of light that slip inside this bubble. Beyond it, there is not nothingness, only places where light has not yet arrived. And perhaps this is also true of inner life. The things you are conscious of, clear emotions, thoughts with shape, are only the light that has managed to reach you. So much else exists outside your bubble of awareness, not because it is unimportant, but because it does not yet need to appear. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us in Meditations, "Nothing happens to any man that he is not formed by nature to bear. Not everything needs to be understood immediately. Not every darkness needs to be illuminated in a single night. There is a profound gentleness in accepting this, that we do not see everything, and that this is okay. The universe does not urge us to expand our bubble of observation. It does not require us to explore the remaining darkness. It allows us to drift slowly, quietly, and safely within the small portion of light we already have. In the modern world, we are often pushed to understand ourselves, to dig deeper, to analyze, to name every emotion, every wound. But tonight we can try another way. No digging, no analysis, just accompanying the thought that most of reality, both outside and within, does not need an explanation. Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote in Letters to a Young Poet, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves." Perhaps the 95% darkness of the universe is a reminder like that. Not every question needs an answer. Not every empty space needs to be filled. Some spaces exist so that we may have room to rest. When you allow yourself not to understand everything, the mind can slow down. Like turning off a few lights in a room, the space suddenly feels larger. And in that gentle darkness, there is no pressure to see clearly, no demand to grasp, only presence, simple and quiet. You are here. The universe is there. Between the two is a vast darkness, not threatening, not demanding, simply existing. Tonight, when we say that only 5% is light, we are not speaking of lack. We are speaking of balance. because it is precisely that overwhelming darkness that gives light a place to emerge. And it is precisely what remains unexplained that allows what you are feeling right now to soften. You do not need to expand your bubble. You do not need to touch the infinite ocean beyond. You only need to drift and allow the thought, I do not need to understand everything, to become a soft pillow for the mind. The story will continue. Light will be spoken of again. Distances will keep expanding. But right now, within the darkness that makes up most of everything, you are allowed to simply be still. Once we have accepted that most of reality rests within that gentle darkness, we can return to something deeply familiar, not to shrink the universe, but to anchor the mind to the only place we have ever truly touched: Earth. On the human scale, Earth is the largest thing we know through direct experience, not through numbers, but through feeling. A single lifetime is not enough to walk every road, not enough to see every ocean, not enough to touch every continent. Even if we never stop moving, Earth always keeps certain distances, places we have never set foot on, skies we have never looked up into. On the human scale, Earth is vast, so vast that one can live an entire life in a very small corner and still feel as though one has been in the world. And yet here, a very gentle paradox appears. Because no matter how large Earth feels to us, the truth remains we do not live on Earth. We live on its surface, a very thin layer. So thin that if Earth were an apple, all of human history, every city, every language, every pain, and every joy would exist only on the skin. This image is not meant to make us feel small. It simply reminds us that Earth's sense of largeness is relative. We stand on a massive sphere, yet we see only fragments, familiar roads, familiar rooms, familiar skies. And perhaps this is also true of inner life. We often believe we know ourselves. But the part we truly touch, thoughts with words, emotions with names, is only the surface. The deeper part, like the far side of Earth beyond the horizon, is still there, but outside our view. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "Every deep thinker is more afraid of being understood than of being misunderstood." There are depths that do not need to be excavated immediately. There are distances that do not need to be crossed in a single night. When we think of Earth, we often think of stability. It was here before we were born. It will remain after we are gone. It gives us a feeling of firmness, a ground to stand on. But if we look more slowly, we notice something else. Even Earth is drifting. It spins. It moves. It is not still in space. Its motion is simply too slow for our senses to register. There is a strange comfort in this, because if even the ground beneath our feet is not fixed, then perhaps the instability of the mind is not a failure. Marcus Aurelius once offered a quiet reminder in Meditations: observe constantly that all things take place by change. Change is not a rupture, it is the natural state. Earth changes, climate changes, landforms change. Life appears, disappears, and returns in other forms. And humanity is only a very small part of that flow. On Earth's own scale, human history is a brief flicker, a very short beat within a very long movement. This thought may cause the mind to sway slightly, but if it passes through like a night breeze, it brings with it a relief that is hard to name. Because if Earth does not need us in order to continue existing, then perhaps we do not need to carry the entire weight of the world on our shoulders. Earth allows us to live on its surface. It does not ask us to understand it fully. It does not ask us to control it. It only asks that we be here. There is a quiet beauty in that. Carl Jung once wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The psyche is not of today. Its ancestry goes back many millions of years. The human mind, like Earth itself, contains layers upon layers, ancient memories older than personal consciousness, movements so deep they do not require words. And just like Earth, we do not need to reach the core in order to live fully. We only need enough stillness not to deny what lies beyond our sight. When we stand on the ground, we rarely think about the molten core beneath us. Yet it is there, silent, keeping the planet alive. Within you, it is the same. There are deep layers that do not need to be opened right now. They do not demand attention. They only ask for respect. And then very gently, a transition begins. Because no matter how large Earth feels to us within a wider picture, it will become small quickly. Not because it loses its value, but because the frame is expanding, like stepping out of a dark room onto a balcony and then lifting your eyes to the sky. The room does not disappear. It simply is no longer the whole world. Tonight, as we regard Earth as the largest thing we have ever touched, we do not stop there. We use it only as an anchor, a familiar point before letting our gaze widen just a little more. No rush, no jolt, only enough to let the mind breathe. You are here, on a very small part of a very large sphere, and in this moment that is enough. The story will continue. The frame will expand. Familiar scales will slowly dissolve. But before Earth becomes small, allow yourself to stay with it for one more moment. Feel the ground beneath your feet, the rhythm of breath in your chest, and the ancient calm of being held by something large enough to support you. After standing still on the surface of Earth long enough, feeling the ground as an ancient and familiar anchor, we can gently lift our gaze without haste toward the source of light that has nourished all life on this planet, the sun. On the scale of a human life, the sun feels like a given. It rises each morning, sets each evening, bringing light, warmth, and rhythm to day and night. So familiar that we rarely pause to ask how large is it really. But when that question is finally allowed to form, a very strange quiet appears. Not the silence of missing information, but the silence of lost proportion. Because compared to Earth, the largest thing we have ever touched, the sun, is not just a little bigger. It is so vast that everyday comparisons begin to falter. If Earth were a tiny grain you could hold between two fingers, the sun would be a sphere of fire wide enough to swallow millions of such Earths within itself, not as a threat, simply as a consequence of existing at its true scale. And here the familiar feeling of large begins to dissolve. Distances that once mattered a long journey, a wide ocean, suddenly feel fragile when set beside the source of energy that has governed our entire living system for billions of years. A natural humility arises when we look at the sun this way. Not a humility forced upon us, but the humility that comes from realizing we are not the measure of all things. Baruch Spinoza once wrote in Ethics, "Man is not a kingdom within a kingdom. Human beings are not a separate realm cut off from a greater order. We live, breathe, and think within a structure in which the sun plays a quiet central role, holding every motion steady enough that it does not fall into chaos." Yet there is a gentle detail we often overlook. The sunlight you see is not the light of this very moment. It left the sun earlier, traveled through space, crossed vast emptiness. And only after a slight delay, small yet enough to change how we feel time, did it finally reach your eyes. This means that every time you look at the sun, you are looking into the past. Not a distant past, but enough to remind us that our present is always built upon what has already occurred. There is a quiet beauty in this thought, because if the light that nourishes us today was born from a moment already gone, then perhaps not everything needs to happen immediately in order to matter. Things that arrive slowly can still be warm enough. In inner life, we are often impatient with ourselves. We want to understand right away, to heal right away, to see results right away. But the sun is not in a hurry. It burns its fuel in a process so slow that a human lifetime cannot sense it. And it is precisely this slowness that allows life to endure. Heraclitus once said, "The sun is new each day," not because its nature changes, but because every moment its light reaches us is a new meeting. Perhaps we too need to learn how to meet ourselves in this way, not demanding instant perfection, only enough patience to let light arrive in its own rhythm. When we place Earth beside the sun, we are not only learning about size, we are learning about position. Earth does not shine. It does not generate energy. It simply receives. And within that receiving, everything necessary for life takes shape. There is a very gentle comfort here. You do not need to be the source of light. You do not need to radiate constantly. Sometimes it is enough to know how to stand in the right place and allow yourself to be warmed. Carl Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The sun is the symbol of the source of consciousness." And yet even this symbol does not ask us to stare directly. It allows us to look indirectly through reflected light, through life quietly unfolding. Perhaps human consciousness is the same. We do not need to shine a harsh light into every shadow. Sometimes it is enough to notice what is being silently nourished. And then, quite naturally, another feeling begins to surface. Everything that once felt familiar, earth day and night daily rhythms, starts to lose its proportions, not to make us feel lost, but to prepare us for a wider frame, like stepping out of a warm room, standing beneath the night sky, and realizing that the single source of light you see is only one among countless others that exist beyond. But before going farther, we can remain here a little longer, at a distance gentle enough not to blind, for a span of time calm enough not to rush. You are being warmed by the light of a star that existed long before you were born and will continue to exist after you are gone. And in this moment that does not make you smaller, it simply places you where you belong. The story will continue, distances will expand, proportions will dissolve further still. But right now, let the light arrive slowly. Let the silence between earth and sun become a warm, quiet breath. You do not need to do anything at all. Just listen and allow that very near past to keep warming your present softly without a sound. When the sun's light has lingered long enough to warm the mind and the familiar sense of proportion has just begun to dissolve, something else quietly comes into view, not as a shape, but as distance. Not what exists, but the spaces between things. We often imagine the solar system as a crowded picture planet circling the sun, orbits intertwined motion everywhere. But when we look more slowly, truly slowly, we realize that this picture is drawn mostly with empty space. The distance from Earth to the Sun is called 1 astronomical unit, a unit that sounds neat and manageable. But if we measure it not with rulers but with time, light needs 8 minutes and 20 seconds to cross that span. 8 minutes, not long in a human life, yet long enough to change how we feel about right now. Because every time sunlight touches your skin every morning when the sky brightens, you are living inside a very small delay of the universe. Your present is built from light that belongs to the past. And when we move a little farther out to Jupiter, the giant planet beyond light needs nearly 43 minutes to arrive. To Neptune, at the distant edge of the planetary system, light needs more than 4 hours. These hours of light do not carry images. They carry emptiness. The space between planets is not a busy roadway. It is a quiet ocean where almost nothing collides, where there is nothing to cling to. And here, a very gentle truth reveals itself. The universe is not a place filled with objects, but a place filled with gaps, placed beside inner life. This brings a strange comfort, because we often believe our minds are too full. Too many thoughts, too many emotions, too many memories piled together. But perhaps what exhausts us is not having too much, but not allowing space to exist. Lao Tzu once wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "We mold clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that makes the vessel useful." A vessel has value not because of its walls, but because of the space within. The solar system is the same. The planets, no matter how large, occupy only a tiny fraction. The rest is space for motion, for orbits, for long-term stability. Without those gaps, everything would collide. Chaos would follow. Life as we know it could not exist. Perhaps in the human mind, spaces serve a similar role. The gap between two thoughts, the pause between two breaths, the stillness between two emotions. They are not frightening emptiness. They are safe spaces where things do not crash into one another. Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote in Letters to a Young Poet, "I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. Those circles are not formed only by points of light, but by the distances between them. When we see the solar system through this lens, it no longer looks noisy. It feels like a very slow piece of music where silence makes up most of the melody. The planets do not speak to one another. They do not compete for space. They simply remain at the right distance. And it is precisely this that allows order to persist for billions of years. In modern life, we are often urged to fill every moment. If there is a pause, we reach for our phone. If there is silence, we turn on sound. If there is a second of doing nothing, we feel as though we are wasting time. But the universe does not think this way. The universe invests in emptiness. It gives most of reality to open space, not out of poverty, but because it is the only way complexity can exist without collapsing. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "In the space between the conscious and the unconscious, symbols arise. Between what we know and what we do not yet know, there is a gap, and it is there that meaning becomes possible. When light takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach Earth, it does not bring only energy. It brings a reminder. Not everything needs to arrive immediately. When light takes hours to touch Neptune, it teaches a very slow lesson. Distance is not absence, but the condition for stability. You do not need to fill every thought. You do not need answers to every question. You do not need to turn every silence into action. Sometimes the most necessary thing is to leave the space untouched. Just as the solar system preserves the distances between its planets so they can continue to move smoothly, steadily, without collision. If right now your mind feels spacious, do not rush to fill it. Let it be. Perhaps within that space your breath will slow, your heartbeat will soften, and your thoughts will stop crowding one another. Our story is still unfolding. Distances will continue to grow. Numbers will become larger still. But here between Earth and the Sun, between Jupiter and Neptune, between hours of light drifting in silence, we can learn something very simple. Space is not something that needs to be filled. It is something that needs to be respected. And if you allow yourself to respect the spaces within you, this night may grow lighter without changing a single thing. Simply rest within the emptiness. Once we have grown accustomed to the spaces between the planets, once the mind has accepted that the solar system is not a crowded place, but a vast, quiet ocean, we can move a little farther, not to find a new planet, but to touch the edge of the idea of home. Not a visible edge, but a felt one. Far beyond the orbits of the planets, past Neptune, past the region where sunlight has faded into a dim memory, there exists a structure that never appears in the familiar pictures of the universe. The Oort cloud. It is not a clear ring, not a sharp boundary. It is a hazy region where the sun's gravitational pull begins to weaken, yet has not fully let go. Billions of small, icy bodies drift quietly, emitting no light, rarely colliding, bound only very tenuously to the star that gave rise to them. Here, home is no longer a warm place. It becomes a field of influence, and that in itself creates a strange feeling, because the Oort cloud does not lie at a modest distance. Its outer edge reaches nearly halfway to the nearest star. It no longer fully belongs to the familiar space of the solar system, yet it has not truly crossed into the realm of other stars. It exists in an in-between state, no longer at the center, not yet at a destination. And if we listen carefully, we may recognize a familiar rhythm in this condition. Because many of us have lived at a home's edge like this before, no longer in the old place, not yet truly belonging to the new one, still gently pulled back by familiar things, memories, people, roles, yet already feeling that pull begin to fade. Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote in Letters to a Young Poet, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. At the edge of home, there are no monsters, only a prolonged silence. The Oort cloud is not loud. There are no dramatic motions, no light to draw the eye. It simply exists very slowly as a buffer between the familiar and the unknown. And because of this, it carries a very pure kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of absence, but the loneliness of no longer being surrounded. Even at the edge of home, you are already alone. This thought can make the mind sink, but if we do not rush to escape it, we may find within it a deep and gentle kindness. Because loneliness at the edge of home is not abandonment, it is a sign of expansion. Martin Heidegger once wrote in Being and Time Anxiety Reveals the Nothing, not to frighten us, but to show us a wider space we have never stood in before. The Oort cloud exists, where gravity has weakened to the point that a very small disturbance, a passing star, could pull those icy bodies away, turning them into travelers between stars. At the edge of home, everything can drift away. And the same is true of the thoughts and feelings you have been holding for so long. When the pull of habit of identity of the past begins to weaken, they do not need to be forced to disappear. They simply drift. There is a very natural healing in this process, not through determined letting go, but through standing still at the edge long enough to realize that you no longer need to hold on. Carl Jung once wrote in The Red Book, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." At the edge of home, darkness is not something to be driven away. It only needs to be accompanied. The Oort cloud has no light of its own. It reflects only the faintest trace of light from a center now very far away. Yet it does not collapse. It does not dissolve. It endures for billions of years in this dim state. This offers a very gentle reminder: you do not need to shine in order to remain. You do not need certainty. You do not need a clear direction. You do not need to know where you are going next. Sometimes it is enough not to go back and not yet to move forward. At the edge of home, time flows differently. There is no clear rhythm of day and night, no schedules, only very long, very slow cycles. And within that slowness, the mind can perhaps for the first time rest. If right now you feel that you are standing in some kind of in-between place in your life, between an old relationship and a new possibility, between a familiar self and a nameless question, remember that the universe has regions like this too, not broken, not in need of fixing, simply existing. The Oort cloud does not know that it is a boundary. It does not name itself as an edge. It simply stays where it is, fulfilling its role within a larger structure. And perhaps you too do not need to know exactly where you stand in the whole story of your life. It is enough to know this: here is enough for tonight. Our story will travel farther still. There will be greater distances, deeper lonelinesses. But before leaving home entirely, allow yourself to remain at the edge a little longer, where gravity has softened, where no one asks you to return, and no one yet demands that you go on. Even the edge of home is already lonely. And within that loneliness, there is a space wide enough to set your mind down and sleep. Standing at the edge of home, where gravity has softened into the lightest of touches, the gaze naturally turns outward toward the nearest star, near in the way we usually speak, but not near in the way the universe understands. Its name sounds familiar, almost neighborly: Proxima Centauri. Together with Alpha Centauri, it forms the closest stellar system to us. And it is precisely this closeness that opens a deep stillness, because the moment we try to move toward it, every familiar measure quietly dissolves. If we were to travel at human speed, not the speed of light, that nearness would stretch far beyond a single lifetime, beyond many lifetimes. The numbers lose their meaning in the gentlest way possible, not frightening, only enough to quiet the mind. To imagine it, people often use a kindly model: if the sun were a basketball and Earth a tiny bead floating around it, then that nearest star would not be in the room, not in the city. It would lie beyond an ocean. That distance is not threatening. It simply does not belong to hurry. And here, something very subtle happens in the mind. We realize that the human word near cannot be used for the universe. It is a different word, a different language. Humans call near what can be reached within a lifetime. The universe calls near what can exist within the same rhythm of time. Between two stars, separated by a few light years, there is no shared now. Only present moments out of phase, drifting in parallel, never touching. If this thought is allowed to stay long enough, it does not make us sad. It makes us slow. Because so many things in our lives are called near yet are in fact separated by invisible oceans, between two people, between what we desire and what we can reach, between intention and action. We often blame ourselves for failing to reach what feels so close, but perhaps it was never close in the way we imagined. Martin Heidegger once wrote in Being and Time Nearness is not determined by shortness of distance. Closeness is not measured by short space. It is measured by a mode of being. Proxima Centauri is nearer to us than any other star, and yet it lies beyond the reach of a human life. That does not make it meaningless. It simply places it where it belongs, a point of reference, not a destination. And perhaps in our inner lives, we need points like that as well. Things close enough to orient us, yet distant enough not to be possessed. Aims not meant to be reached, but to be faced. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. A star does not need to be within reach. It only needs to be far enough to keep motion from stopping." When we understand that near in the universe is not the same as near in human life, a strange relief appears. We stop forcing distances that were never meant to be compressed. We allow them to remain at their rightful scale. Like the distance between Earth and Proxima Centauri, it is not a rejection. It is a necessary quiet. The universe is not designed as an intimate network. It is not a crowded community. It is more like a collection of temporal islands, each existing in its own rhythm, not needing to meet in order to matter. Seen through this lens, we can set down an old burden, the burden of always having to be close. Not every connection requires physical presence. Not everything important demands contact. Some values only need to be held in the direction of the gaze. Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote in Letters to a Young Poet, "Love consists in this, that two solitudes protect and touch and greet each other. Two solitudes do not need to erase distance. They only need to respect it. The nearest star is still too far. And precisely because of that, it does not intrude upon our lives. It does not demand. It does not make noise. It remains there very quiet, like a reminder that not everything close needs to be touched." And perhaps that is a gentle lesson for tonight. If you are thinking of something near yet distant, a wish you cannot step toward, a person you cannot truly reach, try placing it within the scale of the universe. Not to give up, but to stop blaming yourself. You are not slow. You are not lacking. It is simply that this distance does not belong to the scale of a human life. Between the stars, patience is not a virtue. It is the condition of existence. And within that vast patience, the universe allows everything to remain where it belongs. Our story will continue to widen. There will be greater distances still, scales that force intuition to loosen its grip. But before leaving the nearest, stay with this feeling a little longer, the feeling that you do not need to arrive. You only need to know that it exists. The nearest star is still there, very far, very still. And in that unreachable distance, your mind may finally rest. leaving behind the distances between the nearest stars where the word near has already lost its familiar meaning. We begin to enter another kind of space, the Milky Way, not as a destination, but as a setting, a vast city of light where hundreds of billions of lamps burn quietly, each carrying a story longer than human history. From Earth, the Milky Way appears only as a faint, misty band stretching across the night sky. Thin, still, easy to overlook. Yet behind that veil lies a structure nearly 100,000 light-years across, containing between 100 and 400 billion stars. Each star could be a sun, and around many of them there may exist worlds we will never touch. Our sun does not sit at the center. It rests in a relatively quiet outer region about 26,000 light-years from the galactic core. Not a special position, not a privileged one, just a temporary address in a city that never sleeps. And the strange thing is, the entire city is moving, not chaotically, not hurriedly, but in a rotation so slow that human intuition cannot feel it. The sun, along with Earth, you and every thought you have ever had, is orbiting the center of the Milky Way at roughly 800,000 kilometers per hour. It sounds fast, but to complete a single orbit takes about 225 million years. The last time the sun occupied the same position in that cycle, Earth had no humans, no language, no memory. Dinosaurs had not yet appeared. And when we place a human life a few decades, if we are fortunate within that rotation, a very deep quiet emerges. Not because a human life is small, but because it does not need to be compared. We are drifting within an immense slow motion. So slow it does not ask us to keep up. So slow that anxiety about the right timing suddenly feels unnecessary. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "Time is a river of passing events, and strong is its current. No sooner is a thing brought to sight than it is swept by, and another takes its place, and this too will be swept away." The Milky Way is that river, and we do not need to swim. We only need to float. In this city of light, stars do not crowd one another. The distances between them are measured in light years, not meters. Most of space is empty. Light is the exception, not the rule. And this brings a gentle comfort. Existence does not need to be crowded in order to matter. We often grow weary from feeling surrounded by too much, too many people, too many sounds, too many expectations. Yet the Milky Way, with its hundreds of billions of stars, is a very spacious place. So spacious that everything can remain quietly in its proper place. There is no pressure, no schedule, only motion. At this scale, there is no too late, no mist, only orbits. And perhaps this is what makes the Milky Way such a perfect lullaby. It allows everything to unfold at its own rhythm. You do not need to run faster than the galaxy's rotation. You do not even need to know where you are within it. It is enough to know this: you are being carried. Just as Earth orbits the sun orbits the galactic center, and the galaxy itself moves within an even larger structure, each layer of motion holding the smaller one within it. There is no abandonment here, only circles nested within circles. When we think of the Milky Way as a city, we often imagine lights. But perhaps what matters more is the darkness between them. It is that darkness which gives light the space to exist. In the same way, inner life contains spaces, nights without goals, moments when we do not know what we are doing that are not failures. They are the necessary distances between stars. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order. The Milky Way is that hidden order within apparent chaos. And when the human mind is seen this way, it too can be forgiven. You do not need to know the entire map of the city. You do not need to understand every road. You do not need to name every light. Just remain within this rotation a little longer. A rotation with no climax, no clear ending, only a very long continuation. And within that continuation, everything that once made you restless, an undecided choice, an unanswered question, a person you do not yet understand is quietly placed into its proper scale, not to be diminished, but to be allowed to breathe. Our story will continue beyond the Milky Way. There will be galaxy clusters, superstructures, even greater emptiness. But before leaving this city of hundreds of billions of lights, let your mind rest on one simple image. You are lying somewhere on Earth. Earth is drifting around an ordinary star. That star is orbiting within a vast galaxy, and the entire system is moving in silence. No sound, no urgency, no one asking you to understand. Only a very slow rotation, slow enough for you to sleep. Once we have grown accustomed to the slow rotation of the Milky Way, once the idea that an entire human life is only a very thin slice within a cycle lasting hundreds of millions of years has begun to settle, our perspective naturally opens one step further, not through a sudden leap, but through a very gentle motion, as if we only need to lift our gaze slightly. And there the Milky Way no longer stands alone. It has neighbors. This nearby region is called the local group, a small cluster of galaxies modest when compared to what lies beyond, made up of roughly 50 galaxies of varying sizes. Most of them are faint, quiet dwarf galaxies drifting gently around three main bodies, our Milky Way, Andromeda, and Triangulum. It sounds like a peaceful suburb, but the moment we try to measure the distances between these homes, a sense of vertigo appears, not loudly, not dramatically, but very deeply. Andromeda, the largest galaxy in the group, lies about 5 million light-years away. This means that the light leaving Andromeda did so when the distant ancestors of humans had not yet learned to stand upright, when they still wandered through landscapes utterly unlike the Earth we know today. That light has crossed space for 2.5 million years without stopping, without deviation, only to reach our eyes in this moment and then vanish. Here light is no longer something familiar. It is no longer a lamp that turns on instantly or the morning sun pouring through a window. Light becomes a slow messenger, a courier that carries no breaking news, only memory. When we look at Andromeda, we are not seeing it now. We are seeing what it once was. And this feeling is strange. We often believe we live in the present, but the universe disagrees. Everything we see belongs to the past, near or far is only a matter of delay. Even the light from the sun has already aged 8 minutes before it touches your skin. We are simply used to that small delay, so we do not name it. When the delay stretches into millions of years, the mind stops trying to control. It lets go. And in that letting go, a quiet emerges. We begin to realize that most of reality does not operate on our rhythm. It has its own schedule, far slower, and it is no less precise because of that. Albert Einstein once wrote in a letter of consolation, "The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. In the local group, this is no longer a philosophical idea. It is a very literal description. The galaxies are not next to one another in the way we understand closeness. They simply share an expanding temporal frame where light serves to connect moments separated by millions of years. And what is striking is this: we have not even left the suburbs of the universe. The local group is only a small cluster, a very modest corner of the larger picture. Yet even here, every familiar scale has collapsed. Numbers beyond imagination do not need to be fully understood. They only need to be left alone, just as in inner life. We often think that relationships feel distant because of physical separation, but there are distances not measured in kilometers, but in mismatched rhythms of time. Two people can stand very close, yet live in two presents that never touch. Like two galaxies in the local group existing together, bound by gravity, yet needing millions of years for each other's light to arrive. Martin Buber once wrote in I and Thou, all real living is meeting. But the universe gently revises. This not all existence requires meeting. Some forms of being only need to accompany one another from afar. The local group is an example of this. The galaxies within it do not converse, do not exchange, do not know one another in any conscious sense. They simply drift within the same gravitational field, within the same slow current, and that is enough. This thought can offer a very quiet comfort. You do not need to touch everything for it to matter. You do not need to be close by human definitions. Some connections exist best when held at their proper distance. When you look up at the night sky and see Andromeda as a faint smudge, you are seeing a vast galaxy containing hundreds of billions of stars. But you are also witnessing the patience of the universe. 2.5 million years is not a delay. It is the normal speed of things here. And if we look closely, the local group is not chaotic. It is a very quiet community where each member keeps enough distance not to intrude, yet remains close enough not to drift away. A gentle image of coexistence without interference. Carl Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." In the local group, such reactions do not happen abruptly. They unfold through gravity, through vast orbits, through processes lasting billions of years. Change, when it occurs, is always slow enough not to shatter the overall structure. Perhaps this is why, when we expand our view beyond the Milky Way, we do not feel more tense. Instead, we feel lighter. Because the universe does not rush. It does not demand that we keep up. It only invites us to look and allows light to do the rest. We have not left the suburbs, and already we feel dizzy. But this is not the dizziness of fear. It is the dizziness of recalibration, when the mind realizes it has been using the wrong measuring tool for a world not designed on a human scale. And in that recalibration, sleep comes more easily, not because we are exhausted, but because we stop trying to understand everything. We let light go ahead. We let distance remain intact. We let galaxies stay quietly in their roles. The local group drifts through the mind like a vast, peaceful suburb. Homes separated by millions of light years. Slow messengers carrying the past. And somewhere within it all, very small, very quiet, is you listening. The story will continue to widen. There will be larger clusters, stronger currents. But before leaving this neighborhood, stay with this feeling a little longer, the feeling that you are not abandoned in a vast universe. You are simply in a suburb where distance is measured in time and silence is the shared language. And within that silence, the mind can slow down. The light is still arriving, just very, very slowly, leaving the nearby cluster where galaxies can still be called neighbors. Even though light already needs millions of years to cross the distance, we begin to sense a very subtle change. Not a deeper overwhelm, but a gentler loss of orientation. Because here the universe no longer appears as scattered points of light. It begins to feel like a flow. The structure we are drifting within is called Laniakea, a name drawn from Hawaiian meaning immeasurable heaven, a sky that cannot be measured, not because we lack instruments, but because the very idea of measurement starts to feel misplaced. Laniakea is not an object, it has no clear edge. It is a web of motion where roughly 100,000 galaxies are carried along by invisible gravitational currents spread across hundreds of millions of light years. At this scale, we no longer speak of position, we speak of direction. Our Milky Way, together with Andromeda, together with tens of thousands of other galaxies, does not stand still within Laniakea. Everything is moving very slowly toward a particular region of space known as the Great Attractor. We do not see it directly. It is obscured by dust and stars within our own galaxy, but we know it is there because everything is falling toward it. Falling, but not in the way we are used to. There is no plunge, no collision, no sound. Only a very slight tilt of trajectories, a tendency that unfolds over hundreds of millions of years. A river with no banks, no surface, only direction. And when we allow this image to remain in the mind long enough, a very strange feeling appears. The feeling that everything in our lives too is falling, but falling very slowly toward places we cannot see. Not toward a concrete destination, not toward a clear ending, but toward a field of meaning. We often live as if every movement must be consciously controlled, as if unless we move fast enough, we will be left behind. But Laniakea offers another model of existence, the model of being carried, not pushed, not forced, simply borne along by a current so vast that individual effort is no longer required. Carl Sagan once wrote in Cosmos, "The universe is not required to be in perfect harmony with human ambition." Within Laniakea, this sentence does not sound bitter. It sounds freeing. The universe does not adjust itself to our desires, and therefore we do not need to strain ourselves to keep pace with the universe. Everything is falling very slowly towards something unseen. If this sentence sounds like a lullaby, it is not because it promises safety, but because it removes the demand for control. When all galaxies are drifting along gravitational currents, no galaxy has to ask whether it is moving in the right direction. The direction is set by the structure of space itself, and this opens a very gentle reflection for inner life. Perhaps not every movement within you needs a clear reason right now. Perhaps you too are being drawn towards something, not a place, but a state, and the only thing required is to allow that slowness to unfold. Laniakea is not a stationary supercluster. It is a map of flows. Galaxies are not grouped by shape or color, but by how they move. When astronomers draw this map, they do not mark where things are. They mark where things are going. This is a profound shift in perspective. We are used to locating ourselves by coordinates. I am here, I want to go there. But at the scale of Laniakea, the question is no longer, where am I? It becomes, which current am I in? And when this question is brought back into human life, it becomes a very soft whisper. You do not need to know the destination of every feeling. You only need to recognize the field you are moving within. There are periods in life that feel like being pulled forward without understanding why. Not because we lack will, but because there are currents larger than personal will. Changes happen not in days, but in years through relationships, through accumulated perceptions, through layers of understanding slowly settling. Like galaxies in Laniakea, we do not collide as we drift. We shift our trajectories only slightly, just enough that over long spans of time, everything becomes different. Here, the universe's lullaby becomes clearer than ever. There is nothing that needs to be rushed. There is nowhere that must be reached immediately. Even the strongest gravitational forces work in ways so slow they feel almost gentle. The great attractor is not a giant magnet violently pulling everything toward it. It is a denser region of existence toward which paths gradually incline. And it is precisely this barely noticeable inclination extended over hundreds of millions of years that creates motion. Perhaps the deepest changes in human life are like this as well. Not dramatic decisions, but very small tilts of the mind. A slightly altered way of seeing, a shifted priority, a quiet release. Within the flow of Laniakea, the idea of a fixed center dissolves. There is no single center, no external vantage point from which the whole can be seen. Each galaxy knows only its own motion and the presence of nearby ones. The full structure emerges only when viewed from far away over very long spans of time. This brings a calm reassurance. You do not need to see the entire picture to belong rightly within it. You do not need to understand the great attractor to be carried by Laniakea, just as you do not need to fully understand your life in order to live it. Everything is falling very slowly towards something unseen, not into nothingness, but into a larger order. And within that order, the exhaustion of having to constantly orient yourself can for a while be set down. You do not need to paddle. You do not need to fight the current. You only need to float. Our story will continue to expand beyond even superclusters into the cosmic web where filaments and vast voids intertwine. But before leaving Laniakea, stay with this feeling a little longer. The feeling that even when you do not know where you are going, you are still moving with the universe. And in that very slow motion, there is nothing that must be done urgently, nothing that must be understood right now. There is only an invisible river carrying everything along gently, and that you may allow yourself to drift with it. Once we have grown familiar with the idea that galaxies do not merely stand still, but drift within invisible gravitational currents, our perspective opens yet another layer, a layer where the universe no longer resembles a star-scattered sky, but a structure. An architecture so vast it can only be seen when we step very far back for a very long time. And when we retreat far enough, what appears is not neat order, but a gigantic web. This structure is called the cosmic web. Filaments and walls of galaxies stretching across hundreds of millions, even billions of light years. Immense voids lying between them where almost nothing exists. Within this structure, galaxies do not fill space. They cling only to the thinnest edges of existence, like soap bubbles gathering along the boundaries of enormous pockets of air. This image carries a strangely powerful effect, because we often imagine the universe as full of stars, full of matter, full of things to see. But at the largest scale, we discover the opposite emptiness is the normal state. Existence in the sense of structure, matter, light is the exception. The great galaxy walls, such as the Sloan Great Wall, one of the largest structures ever observed, are not solid masses. They are thin sheets where galaxies are only slightly denser than their surroundings. And around them lie the voids, vast regions hundreds of millions of light years across, where if you were to stand at the center, you would see almost no galaxies in any direction. Within those voids, light is so rare that the night sky would hold no Milky Way band, no familiar faint smudges of distant neighbors, only darkness, and far away, barely visible, the faint edges of structures clinging to the boundaries of space. Seen from here, the universe resembles a foam bubbles where empty regions occupy most of the volume, and matter exists only on the thin membranes between them. An image that is not tragic, not violent, just quiet. And it is precisely this quiet that carries a deeply healing quality. Because if emptiness is normal, then the emptiness we feel in life periods without clear purpose, days that seem to hold little meaning, no longer needs to be fixed immediately. It is simply following the same rule. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, "The world is everything that is the case, but when standing before the cosmic web, we can add a softer whisper. The world is also everything that does not happen. The gaps, the silences, the empty regions where there are no events, no light, no traces. And these are not errors, they are the ground. In human life, we often measure value by density, how much we have done, how many relationships we hold, how many meaningful moments we can name. But the universe measures structure differently. It allows most of space to carry nothing so that a very small portion can carry form. Existence is rare, emptiness is normal. If this thought is allowed to touch the mind slowly, it does not make us feel small in a negative way. Instead, it eases the pressure to always be full. Not every gap needs to be filled. Not every silence needs an explanation. Galaxies resting on the thin membranes of the cosmic structure do not complain that they occupy only a tiny fraction. They do not try to spread out and fill the voids. They remain exactly where gravity allows them to be. And because of that, the structure endures. Martin Heidegger once wrote in what is called thinking, "The most thought-provoking thing in our thought-provoking time is that we are still not thinking." Perhaps what remains unthought here is the value of emptiness. We are accustomed to believing that meaning appears only where there is content. But the cosmic web shows that meaning also arises from distance, from regions where there is nothing, where there is no crowding, where structure is allowed to breathe. When we look at maps of galaxy distribution, what astonishes us is not the number of galaxies, but the vastness of the regions without them. These voids are not flaws in the cosmic model. They are natural outcomes of evolution. Where matter was slightly denser, it pulled more matter in. Where it was slightly thinner, it grew ever emptier. A very small difference at the beginning, stretched over billions of years, creates enormous empty spaces. And this carries a gentle message for inner life. Not every difference needs to be corrected immediately. A slight deviation, if left alone, can become a space. Within that space, you can rest. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychological Reflections, "In each of us there is another whom we do not know. Perhaps this other often lives within the gaps we try to avoid, moments of doing nothing, moments of not knowing where we are going. But like the voids of the universe, these spaces are not deficiencies. They are places where a different structure can form slowly, very slowly. As the cosmic web spreads across the mind, we realize that most of existence does not ask for attention. It simply is. It does not need to be illuminated. It does not need to be named. And because of this, when light does appear on the thin membranes of galaxies, it becomes precious, not because it is rare, but because it is held within the right context. Just like meaningful moments in human life, they do not need to last long. They only need to be surrounded by enough silence. Our story is approaching even greater boundaries, where what we see is only a very small part of what exists. But before leaving this cosmic web, stay with this gentle feeling a little longer, the feeling that nothing is wrong when your life contains empty spaces. You do not need to fill this night. You do not need to understand every structure. You only need to allow yourself to lie on the thin membrane of existence where there is enough light to see and enough darkness to rest. In the universe, emptiness is normal, and in this night, you are allowed to be so as well. After passing through the cosmic web where existence clings only to thin membranes between immense voids, we begin to touch a very special boundary. Not the limit of imagination, but the limit of what can be seen. A boundary without walls, without signposts, without any marker of an ending. It is called the cosmic horizon. The observable universe, the phrase sounds objective, scientific, almost neutral. But if we listen closely, it carries a very human fragility, because it does not speak of the whole universe. It speaks only of the part whose light has had time to reach us since time itself began. The universe has existed for about 13.8 billion years. Light, the fastest thing we know, has had only that long to travel. But while light has been moving, space itself has been expanding. Distant regions are far not only because of distance, but because they are being carried farther away with every moment. The result is a bubble of observation, not because there is nothing beyond it, but because signals from beyond have never reached us and perhaps never will. Here, a very gentle truth reveals itself. What we see is not what exists. This is not a denial of reality. It is a reminder of our position within reality. We stand at the center of our own observational bubble, and everything outside that bubble, however rich, however crowded, however alive it may be, remains completely silent to us. Not because it does not emit light, but because that light does not belong to our time. And if we look carefully, this is not unfamiliar at all. In human life, we also live within similar bubbles of observation. We see only what has managed to touch our experience. Other possibilities, other paths not taken parallel lives, they may exist, but they send no signal. Not everything that is real needs to be witnessed. Not everything that exists needs to be touched. Immanuel Kant once wrote in Critique of Pure Reason, "We have no knowledge of things as they are in themselves, but only as they appear to us." The cosmic horizon is the universe whispering that sentence back to us. We do not see the universe as it is. We see only how it appears to us within the limits of light, time, and our own position. And this, rather than causing anxiety, can become a deep comfort, because it frees us from the obligation to know everything, to see everything, to reach everything. Beyond the cosmic horizon, there may be infinitely more. Galaxies that have never sent light toward Earth. Structures for which we do not even yet have names. Perhaps a universe many times larger than the part we see. Perhaps infinite. Or perhaps something for which the very idea of large no longer applies. But all these possibilities share one thing in common. We do not need to reach them for this life to have meaning. Tonight, as you lie still and listen to this story, you do not need to imagine everything beyond the cosmic horizon. You only need to know this: not seeing does not mean not existing, and not reaching does not mean lacking. Ludwig Wittgenstein once wrote in Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, "Whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent." But this silence is not ignorance, it is respect for limits, a respect that is essential for peace. In the modern world, we often grow tired from the feeling that we must endlessly expand our knowledge, expand our experiences, expand our perspective. Yet the universe at its own boundary teaches the opposite, knowing when to stop. The cosmic horizon is not a wall blocking us. It is a reminder that you are exactly where light can reach, and that is enough. There are truths that exist only when seen from a distance. And there are things that retain their beauty only when they are not touched. Like stars beyond the observable horizon, no less radiant because of it. They simply belong to another time. Martin Heidegger once wrote in Being and Time, "Being is essentially something that shows itself." But the universe adds a very thin layer to this thought. There are beings that have never had the chance to show themselves, not because they hide, but because space and time have not allowed it. When we accept this, a gentle release occurs in the mind. We no longer need to expand at all costs. We no longer need to reach every possibility. We no longer need to live more than a single human life allows. You do not need to see the entire universe to feel its vastness. Just as you do not need to live every possible life for this one to be complete. What we see is not all that exists, and what we live is not all that could be lived. Yet it is precisely this incompleteness that gives shape to meaning. In the night, as everything slows, the cosmic horizon no longer feels distant. It becomes a very intimate metaphor. There are things you do not see, do not understand, do not reach, and you are allowed to let them remain there. You do not need to expand your mind to infinity. You do not need to carry every question. You do not need to cross every boundary. What you do not see may still be there, and you do not need to touch it. Our story will continue moving deeper into the unseen forces that shape the universe. But before leaving this horizon, stay with this very gentle feeling a little longer, the feeling that some limits are not meant to be crossed, but to be rested within. Light has reached this far. You have reached this far, and that is enough for tonight. Standing at the edge of what can be seen when the cosmic horizon reminds us that what we observe is only a thin slice of existence. The next question arises naturally, without noise, without urgency. If what we see is only a very small part, then what is the rest? This time the universe does not answer with images. It answers with a pause. A darkness that does not shine, does not reflect, does not speak directly, yet governs everything. We call it dark matter and dark energy. Two names that sound like shadow but carry no threat. They are only temporary labels for what we do not yet understand. About 5% of the universe is familiar matter: stars, planets, gas, dust, everything that emits or interacts with light. The remaining 95% consists of these two invisible components. Dark matter does not glow, does not collide, does not leave direct traces. but it reveals itself through its effects. It is the gravitational framework that holds galaxies together. Without it, galaxies would spin so fast they would tear themselves apart. Without it, the Milky Way would have no stable shape. Without it, the city of light we just passed through would quietly dissolve. Dark energy is stranger still. It does not bind, it pushes. It causes space to expand at an ever-accelerating rate. Not fast in the sense of an explosion, but fast in the sense of irreversibility. Distant galaxies grow farther apart, not because they wish to leave, but because the space between them is stretching. The universe in this sense is governed by a force we cannot see, cannot touch, and have only just begun to name. Here a very gentle truth appears. Most of reality is operated by things beyond the current reach of human understanding. And this, rather than unsettling us, can become a deep form of peace if we allow it. Because not knowing here does not mean lacking. It simply means not yet. Not yet for intuition, not yet for language, not yet for the tools we have. The universe is not in a hurry to reveal everything, and it does not require us to understand it all in order to exist within it. Socrates is recorded as having said something simple and enduring: "I know that I know nothing." In the context of dark matter and dark energy, this is no longer moral humility. It becomes an accurate description. We truly live within a reality whose foundational structure lies mostly beyond our understanding. And strangely enough, this does not cause reality to collapse. On the contrary, it continues to operate smoothly, steadily, gently enough for life to arise and think. Dark matter does not need us to understand it in order to keep galaxies together. Dark energy does not need us to name it correctly in order to continue expanding space. They do not depend on human attention. And from this, a very soft lesson emerges. Not everything important needs to be grasped. In inner life, we often grow tired from the need to understand everything, to understand our feelings, the motives of others, the future, the meaning of every event. But the universe, with 95% mystery, lives quite well without such understanding. It allows invisible forces to do their work slowly, patiently, without explanation. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychological Types, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Perhaps part of that acceptance is learning to accept the dark regions, not darkness of fear, but darkness of the unknown." Dark matter and dark energy are not monsters hiding in the shadows. They are regions not yet illuminated by present knowledge. And like all darkness, they do not need to be driven away immediately. If we look closely, the very things we do not understand are already supporting us. You do not need to understand gravity to stand on the ground. You do not need to understand molecular biology for your heart to keep beating. And on a larger scale, you do not need to understand dark matter for the Milky Way to continue existing. Not understanding is not always a deficiency. Sometimes it is the condition for calm. Dark energy, in its role of accelerating expansion, offers a very particular image for the universe's lullaby. Not everything contracts, gathers, seeks a center. Some things are separating, expanding, moving away, and this does not necessarily mean disintegration. It may simply be another phase of existence. In human life, there are periods that resemble dark energy forces that pull us away from old structures, familiar relationships, identities that once held us together. We do not always understand why this happens. We only feel ourselves drifting farther. And when seen through the eyes of the universe, we may become gentler with ourselves. Not every increasing distance is a loss. Sometimes it is natural motion. Martin Heidegger once asked, in What is Metaphysics? Why are there beings at all instead of nothing? Placed beside the 95% mystery of the universe, this question does not demand a definitive answer. It only asks to remain. Like dark matter, like dark energy, like the unnamed parts of you. They do not need to disappear for life to continue. When modern science admits that most of the universe is invisible and not yet understood, it does not weaken itself. It becomes more honest, and that honesty carries a quietly healing beauty, because it allows us to pause, exhale, and stop pretending that we are in control. Knowing that we do not know becomes a kind of peace. Not the peace of resignation, not the peace of indifference, but the peace of setting a burden down. You do not need to understand the universe to sleep well tonight. You do not need to decode dark energy to feel your breath. Invisible forces are doing their work far away, immense, slow. And at this small scale, you are allowed to rest. Our story is moving toward longer stretches of time where the universe begins to ask about its own future. But before we go on, stay with this gentle feeling a little longer, the feeling that not knowing is not a gap that needs to be filled, but a space wide enough for the mind to lie down. 95% mystery does not cause the universe to collapse. It allows the universe to function. And tonight, you may allow the things you do not yet understand within yourself to remain quietly in place as well. When we have accepted that most of the universe is governed by what we do not yet understand, when knowing that we do not know has become a place of rest rather than anxiety, we can step back once more, not through space, but through time. Here, the universe is no longer seen as a structure, but as a very long story stretching from a brilliant beginning toward an ending that is almost without sound. That beginning is called the Big Bang. Not an explosion in the familiar sense, but a moment when space, time, energy, and matter all began to unfold together. There was no before in the way we usually imagine it. No ground to stand on, no direction to look. Only a birth, extremely hot, extremely dense, extremely brief, and then expansion. From that moment, cosmic time began to flow, not by days and nights, not by human lifespans, but by cycles so vast that imagination eventually lets go. Stars are born from cooling clouds of gas, collapsing, igniting. Stars age, swell, and fade. Some leave behind quiet white cores. Some collapse into black holes regions where even time slows. And far in the future, even the most resilient structures do not remain. Stars exhaust their fuel. Galaxies grow dim. Matter decays. Even black holes, if current theory is correct, are not eternal. They evaporate extremely slowly, releasing energy across spans of time almost impossible to conceive. All of this motion points toward a scenario known as heat death. Not destruction, no climax, no crash. Only the universe gradually cooling, thinning, and becoming quiet. Temperature equalizes. Differences disappear. No gradients remain to create meaningful motion. No free energy remains to do work. A silence that stretches without end. At first glance, this vision can weigh on the human mind. But if we stay with it long enough, something else appears. This is not a tragic ending. It resembles a cosmic rest after a story that has lasted tens of billions of years. In human life, we often fear phases of cooling. We fear emotions settling, motivation softening, the loss of drama, the arrival of quiet. But the universe in its long view does not see settling as failure. It sees it as a natural phase. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." In cosmic time, everything is change. No state is preserved forever, no peak is eternal, and no tragedy is permanent. There are only phases of existence unfolding slowly, impartially. Heat. Death, if it occurs, is not the universe dying in the way humans fear. It is the universe ceasing to work, ceasing to generate new structure, ceasing to distinguish hot from cold, light from dark. A nearly meditative state where all differences dissolve into a shared background. And this matters, it is only one scenario. Science is still writing the story. Dark energy may evolve. Unknown physics may appear. The universe may contract. There may be cycles. No one knows for certain. This uncertainty does not weaken the story, it humanizes it. The universe does not insist that it knows where it is going. It simply continues guided by laws we are slowly discovering and willing to revise them when new evidence appears. Albert Einstein once wrote, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious." In cosmic time, mystery is not a frightening gap. It is space for the future, space for the story to remain open, space for life consciousness and understanding to be something other than a brief accident, to be a moment with a place in a very long flow. When we place a human life between the Big Bang and heat death, we are not diminished. We are released from the burden of lasting forever. A short life is not a flaw. It is a rhythm just long enough to feel, to think, to love, to sleep. You do not need to live long enough to see stars die or black holes evaporate. The universe does not ask that of you. It only allows you to appear here for a very small stretch of time and experience it through awareness. Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time, "Time is not a thing, thus nothing, which is, and yet it remains constant in its passing away." Cosmic time is the clearest illustration of this. It cannot be held. It cannot be owned. It only flows. And in that flow, everything has a place, even moments that are very small. If heat death comes, it will arrive after every story has been told, after every light has been emitted, after every structure has completed its role. It is not urgent. It does not threaten. It simply waits, reminding us that nothing needs to be rushed. Science continues to write. Equations may change. Models may shift. But what remains is the slow rhythm of the universe, slow enough for humans to pause, to listen, and to ask questions without needing answers. Tonight, when you think about cosmic time, you do not need to carry fear of endings. You do not need to imagine heat death as something dark. Let it remain distant, faint, a place where all motion is finally allowed to rest. Stars are born, then fade. Matter gathers, then thins. Even the deepest structures eventually release their hold. And within that immense flow, this night of yours is only a small moment, but not a meaningless one. It is a breath of the universe quietly becoming aware of itself. Science continues to write. And tonight, you do not need to write anything at all. After traveling so far through vast emptiness, through invisible gravitational currents through time, stretching from birth to stillness, this journey does not end with an answer, but with a feeling that is very quiet, very small, and very sufficient. On the scale of the universe, a human being is a fragile speck of dust. Earth is a lonely blue point in a darkness too wide to name. Our light does not travel far. Our traces do not last long. And yet, precisely at this small place, the universe begins to do something very special. It turns its gaze back upon itself. Through consciousness, through questions, through the silent moment when you lie down and listen. Carl Sagan once wrote in Cosmos, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." The sentence is not grandiose. It does not place humanity at the center. It simply sets us in our proper role, not as rulers of the universe, not as a final purpose, but as a rare point of awareness where matter has become complex enough to ask about its own origin. The beautiful paradox lives there. We are small in size, yet not meaningless in presence. The universe does not need us in order to exist. But with us, it gains something else, the capacity to be felt. A sky that is seen, a silence that is heard, a story that is told slowly, very slowly, through a voice in the night. And then, after all that expansion, we return, not to the center of the universe, but to this room, to the gentle rise and fall of your breath, to the steady rhythm of your heart, to the sky beyond the window where the stars are still there, unaware that they have just been contemplated. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." Tonight, you do not need to carry the scale of the universe with you. You do not need to remember the numbers. You do not need to hold on to the great concepts. The universe will continue to expand. Galaxies will continue to drift. Time will continue in its own rhythm. None of this requires your supervision. You have done your part. You have listened. You have been present. And that is enough. If there are still thoughts drifting, let them pass like light traveling a very long road. If there are questions without answers, let them remain beyond the horizon. Not everything needs to be resolved for you to rest. You are part of this story, not because you are more important than the universe, but because in this moment the universe is being felt through you. Now let your eyes close, let your breath slow, and let the sky, very distant, very vast, remain quietly in its place. Tonight you do not need to understand anything more. You only need to rest.